We continue in our reading through the New Testament, and if you are visiting, hang tight. That's what our insert is about that has the outline for the sermon today. And if you haven't joined us, now there's no time like the present to join in our reading plan. And I was talking to our team here at St. Michael about our reading plan this week, and we learned that some people like to just read all of it at once, the 5 chapters all at once, so they can get a big picture of what is happening around the scriptures at that time. Well, if that is you this week, I'm sorry. It's going to be a little awkward, okay? But hang in there, okay? So here's where we go and why it's a little awkward. We end Mark 16, which means that Jesus has died and risen again, and we flip the page and we're hearing about his birth, his upcoming birth, right? So it's a little bit backwards from how we would normally think about it. But I think in all of that, Luke does us a favor because he actually gives us this 4-verse introduction to help us with that transition. And that's what I want to concentrate on this morning. And so to do that, we need to know a little bit about who Luke is. We know from even these 4 verses that he's not one of the 12. He actually writes a little bit later account of Jesus, and he has done a thorough investigation. So he's not just talked to one person, but he's talked to many people, and he's compiling data. We also know from Colossians 4 that we'll get into in a little while that he's a physician. And when I first heard that, I thought, well, a first century physician, what would that be like? But actually, some of the practices that are used in medical sciences today come from the discoveries that happened around that time. Like they were kind of earth-shattering. And so this is a guy who had studied, who knew what it was like to investigate things, who knew what it was like to actually get to the heart of a problem and try and fix it. And so that's kind of how he looked at the story of Jesus. What is this all about? And how is it that we can share this with a young man named Theophilus? And I think one of the key terms in this introduction is certainty, right? Certainty it's a word that kind of keys in on a philosophy of knowledge, right? And basically it's the things that you know that you will never doubt. That no matter what happens in your life, it's going to be solid. So right now, I want you to think of 3 things in your life that you're certain of. What are 3 things? My hope is that one of them is Jesus. And to give a spoiler alert, that's where we're going, right? And if it's not, let's talk after worship. That's okay. But what are the other 2 for you? Maybe it's the road to your lake house. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's comfort. I think we all have those things in our life that we're certain of. For me, one of those things, if it'll go, there you go, was a pass through this mountain range. This is the Cascade Mountain Range out in the Pacific Northwest. And they have these passes that go over the mountain so you can get from western Washington to eastern Washington. And I know some of you have lake houses, right? Some of you go out to camp. You know the ways to get there. You could almost close your eyes and know where the road dips enough that you should just accelerate if you have someone new in your car, just to make them a little queasy. Right? We all know those. We know how many right turns and then left turns. Well, that's me on this pass. It's one of those that you just keep on going. And in 2002, I was making this trip almost weekly. And I knew that road until one day I didn't. Went up the pass, started to snow a little bit. Kept on going, started to snow a little bit more. And at one point, as we reached the summit, it got to a whiteout condition. There's 3 semis ahead of me, and there's police behind me shutting down the road. And at that point, I thought, I'm in trouble. And one semi, the one right in front of me, drifts off to the right, tips over. Speed up a little bit more to find the tracks of the next one. He veers off to the left and flips over the median. And at that point, I think, if I stop in my little white Dodge Omni, no one is finding me. And so you just pray that the truck in front of you, you can follow the tires, you can get down the other side. Thankfully, we did, and we were okay. But in those moments of what I thought was certain, all of a sudden, there was a prayer that went up that said, God, help me now. God, help me now. Now, you may not have a whiteout in your life, right? But I think at times we have things that look like this that might give us anxiety because of where we've been and what we've done. Sometimes those things that we know are certain, we hold up so much that they become an idol. They become the most important thing ever. Like, my family is the most important thing, so I'm going to sacrifice everything for them, but all of a sudden I've lost my job. Or my job is the most important thing because that's how I support my family, but I just missed 12 years of my kids' lives. You see, sometimes we hold up things and we hold them up to a degree that it makes us forget about what it is that's really important, the things that are certain, because sometimes those things that we hold up get rocky. They start snowing and they come to a whiteout condition. We see an example of what this looks like in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. On both sides of it. You start with King Nebuchadnezzar, who actually believes he is God. His idol is actually his pride. He has said, no one in the world is more important than I am. And so if you are here, you are bowing down to me. And then you got these 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they say, well, nope. And you know what? We don't even have to defend ourselves to you. God will take care of us. And in that statement, what they're saying, you know, they didn't know how God was going to take care of them. They could have met God a moment later. That could have been how he was taking care of them. But all they knew is that God would provide. That God's provision was there for them in that moment. And so they had a certainty of a hope that wasn't going to go anywhere. Because they could lean on God no matter what. And so we come back to our introduction in Luke. And we read those words, the certainty of the things that you've been taught. But at the same time, our heads kind of spin a little bit because we all know that the world around us is filled with uncertainties. It doesn't take much to open a news article from Google or CNN or BBC or wherever you may find your news to see there's turmoil all around us. There's a city in mourning for a lost life. There's wars that are happening. There are fires. There are, you name it. You can find it because life is happening at a rapid pace around us. And so what was certain has become uncertain. And that's where Luke found himself too. Right? He's investigating who Jesus was and what he meant to the people who connected with him. And that's why he said that you may know the certainty of the things that you've been taught. Well, that certainty comes around Jesus. A few weeks ago, we talked about finding our identity in who God is. And that's the certainty that Luke points us to. He has an understanding that life can get hard. That life is not exactly how we thought it would be. And that idols are formed, and sin happens. But through all of that, there is the certainty of Jesus' love and forgiveness for us. I think that's something that sometimes we say and we have the head knowledge of, but we don't internalize it to say, no, this is actually for us that Jesus came. Not just for Luke and the people around him who he would write their accounts and share the story, but the story of Jesus goes on beyond that writing, and it comes into our lives where we're at. So that when those conditions begin to snow or get worse and maybe come to a whiteout and we're saying, God, help us now. There is a certainty, not just a certainty, the certainty of who Jesus is and what he's done for us. But Luke does not leave it there for Theophilus. He doesn't just say, you know what, there is a certainty, so that's good. He goes on to say, oh, I went too far. There you go. The certainty of the things that you have been taught, right? So sometimes we look at the things that we've been taught and we think, oh yeah, it's really good that we were taught stuff in 8th grade, right? And it's really good that we read the Bible, but we forget that we're always growing. That you can never be too connected to Jesus where he's at. And so as we look at this, it's not just a statement of a young kid on the things that you've been taught, but it's for all of us. What is it that we lean on that we've been taught? What is it that we've been taught about Jesus and who he is and what he's done for us that we can lean into? Because if we're reading the New Testament together, we know and we've already heard that God is speaking into the lives of his people as we do this. The only way to really hone in on that is to lean into what you've been taught, to see what it is that God's speaking. And so we do that in a variety of different ways here, right? We do it in our Sunday school program as we raise up children within that and make it into confirmation and key in on some of the key teachings of the Christian faith. We do it within our school, right? Emmanuel St. Michael that we share with Emmanuel downtown. But we also do it together as a family here at St. Michael. And that's where this Christian Foundations class come in, because it's a way for us to get to know what it is that we believe, or to have a refresher on what it is that we may have learned when we were 13, but may not have it in our heads anymore. And so our hope is that we can find ways and places that you can learn each and every day how much God loves you and how much you are forgiven and what he is speaking into your lives, because I think he speaks into us all in different ways. So as we look at Luke, as we look at what is to come in our readings, we look at it with this light, with this lens, that there is the certainty of Jesus. That no matter what we do, that's the certainty. That's the thing we can stand on firmly. Other stuff may teeter-totter. Other stuff may not go as we planned. But in the end, standing on love and forgiveness and the hope we have because of Jesus allows us to be lifelong learners of that certainty that we have. And get this, Luke didn't just leave it there and say, all right, here's the things you've been taught. He keeps on talking to Theophilus and sharing the story in a way that it connects into lives. And that story doesn't just end at the end of Luke. It doesn't end at the end of Acts, but it keeps on going into our lives. And so the question is, what have you been taught? But also, as you learn about that, who are you teaching? Who is it in your life that needs to know the certainty of Jesus? And who is it that you can have an encouraging conversation with this week to share what you've been taught, to be in conversation, to learn and to love just as you have been loved. Who is that? We hear these words from Luke. So that you may know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. And we go into the world with that thought of taking it with us. Because you have been loved and you have been forgiven and you do have a hope for tomorrow because of him. Amen?